when we had a recording, you were at a point and now you are at a different point. So I would like us to talk about that. Hello, welcome to the Yelo Room podcast. I am so excited to finally be doing this after a while. So tell me, how is your job search going so far? Share it in the comment section. I would like to know. I want to share some good news with you. All our guests that we featured on this podcast that we're searching at the time, they've gotten their dream roles. Rich Owen is a engagement director at Salesforce. Urel, another of our guests, now works as a COBOL programmer at a bank. And another of our guests shared our goal was to publish a book, and she has published her book. So this is to give you hope that your offer letter is coming sooner than you actually think. So don't give up. Keep showing up, keep applying, keep doing what you have been doing so far, and definitely you're going to get your offer letter. The Other Room podcast is a safe space where job seekers come in and share their stories. They share their vulnerable moments. It's a space to air out your thoughts, your insights, how the job market can be better, and what you've always wanted to say to hiring managers. The thing you've always wanted to say, this is a place to air it all out. And guess what? You can be our next guest. I'll drop a link in the description below and we'll get started from there. So our guest for today is Tom. Tom has over 25 years of experience in software development and system architecture. He has worked across various industries. He has worked in healthcare. He has consulted. He has worked in supply chain. He has a wealth of wisdom and knowledge, which we are going to talk about in this episode. So before we dive in there, we had a redo of our podcast. We did an episode, but the quality was so bad. So I thought, okay, we could actually re-record to make it much better. And here we are. And Tom graciously accepted to redo it again. So thank you so much, Tom, for that.
No problem.
So let's get started. Tom, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag to say what is it, but when we had a recording, you were at a point and now you are at a different point. So I would like us to talk about that. So before we go into that, just say a bit about yourself, introduce yourself to our listeners.
Okay. So I'm Tom Kelleher. I live in the United States. I live in New Jersey in the United States on the East Coast. I been a software developer since around 1995. And I started my work. Yeah, I started my work life in 86 when I graduated from college as a technical writer, then internal to our company. I was a video producer, kind of internal videos and things, but wonderful work. Then I was a trainer at a hospital and then started finding myself drawn more to computers just as Microsoft Windows kind of went from a very primitive thing to Windows 3.1 and it got very interesting and very, very graphical. And I started into training on technology topics. And from there went into software development. And that was just as the internet became a thing. And so my first 10 years or so were pretty splendid because I was riding the train of internet development and all the excitement around that. And since then, I've had lots of great customers as a consultant. I've had lots of great employers. I've had some bad employers, had some bad consulting contract customers as well. But yeah, so back then I was hunting and you and I had our first conversation. And since then I have gotten that that offer letter as you just described in your intro. So offer letter received and thank you. And have started as a senior developer for that has a system for managing automobile and transportation parts. So I can go more into it, but it's essentially being a software developer on a piece of software that's about 25 years old that has it's been evolving slowly over the years to today. And I'm on the team that's kind of helping cast it in its newest form so that we can proceed with customers into the future. So that's what I do. I do my software development.
All right. So that was a brief intro. So then let's get into your job search, right? Because most of our listeners are job seekers. They are most likely been job searching for more than 4 months, 6 months, some even up to a year. So I would like you to take us through your job search journey. You said you were searching around May, right? Or so take us through it. Basically a brief, or rather just flow as it comes to you.
Not a problem. Actually, I had 2 job searches in the past year, and I'm looking at the date, and right now 1 year ago was the last day at my last big job. So I was working for a company here in the States in North Carolina, and it's a startup, and it was no surprise. And so my boss had let me know 3 weeks earlier that I was going to the job was going to be discontinued. But the September 6th, a year ago to the day, was that last day, and I started my first job hunt. That job hunt went relatively quickly. And even that was about 7 weeks of active job hunting. And I landed a position in a company in Texas. That one went terribly. The job hunt was fine. I ended up actually with 2 different job offers, which I know is a rarity. I've never had it happen before. And I had to I'd actually already accepted this job offer when this other one came along for a much higher amount of money. And I'm like, and decided to go with this one. All my friends laugh at me, by the way, because I was kind of I've got a group of friends that I keep up with, and I'm telling them all the red flags about the job that I was considering. Like, I got this one, but this other one is really, really, really neat. And I took the job, and all the red flags turned out to be true. And I got fired 6 weeks into the job
Wow.
for trumped up ridiculous reasons. And there's a whole story there. Anyway, and then I met this whole subculture of people who'd similarly been kicked out of this company for similar, kind of shameful reasons.
Yeah.
That started my second big job hunt. That's when we met. So that was from December, essentially January, like January 1st through until June when I got the current position. The job, that was the harder job hunt. I was much longer. I was very pleased with myself that the first one only took like 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I'm like, oh, I'll be able to land another one right. Did not. I had no, it's hard not to, I suppose, but I had this attitude of like, I must be really good at this. I must be very clever as a job hunter. My skills are in need. Look how quick. I had 2 job offers and then absolutely nothing for 6 months. So that was rough. I mean, it was probably, I'd like to think that I got over my arrogance, in the first month or two, that it wasn't going to be that easy. And so it was 6 months of, using up savings and tapping into other things and kind of, cutting all our expenses down and all the rest and trying to manage this and doing all the clever things, all the clever things that I tried the first time and things I learned from your channel, things I learned from other people, explored a couple of new technologies, but started to realize how little I was interested in learning a lot of new technology.
Mm.
So we'll probably get into that a bit later, just kind of capturing like what the year was like. That's what the year was like. So back in June, I did end up getting a job, and it's a little weird to think about because based on, in a sense, my own talents and my own resumes, I rarely got an interview as opposed to the previous time when I had many interviews. This time I had almost none. And in the end, it was that a friend of mine works at this company where they had an open position. And so it was a direct reference. And then when I spoke to the hiring manager, he said, yeah, we like to hire from inside the family. And he didn't mean like relatives, but like if you know somebody, if you work with us and you know somebody and you know this other guy, we're going to give them a higher priority as an interviewee. And that's what happened. I ended up kind of luckily stumbling into a company where they have that kind of attitude. And I mean, I've got my skills and my background, but it was almost like I can't look at getting that offer letter in June and say that's because I'm brilliant at job hunting. It was right, largely it was that a good friend of mine said, "Hey Tom, we've got a thing. Let me share your name." And then it turned out to be a company where that counted a lot. Right. The next company over might have just looked at resume. Every resume is just equal, and I don't know that it would have gotten. So I kind of come away with this a little embarrassed because I don't know what deep, brilliant insights I can bring to the Yellow Room today. In the end,
You have lots of insights to give. You have lots of insight. We are going to talk. So let's go to the insight, how we met, right? You shared a post on mindset shifts on interviewing. That post was mind blowing, literally, because at that time I was struggling to pass interviews. In job search, when you apply for job, that is a whole different on its own, whole problem. When you apply for a job and you don't get a call back, or you get a rejection letter, that is another level. But when you now pass that level, maybe you've gotten you know how to write your resume, just little tips, all that, and you move to the interview, that is a whole different level. It needs different entire type of skills. So when I saw that, and when I saw that post, I'm like, My God, I was mind blown. I think I reposted that and also shared it again. And I also made like so many posts out of just that insight. So yeah, tell us
Uh,
about that particular post. Share it with our listeners here.
I will. Thank you. I appreciate you remembering that so well. It definitely, I suppose it comes from when I was a consultant. So I spent about 15 years purely just running my own little company, and I was just, farming my talents out. So it may have come from that. But what I wrote in that post was remembering that when you're doing an interview for a job, you're there to solve their problem. They're not there to solve your problem. Your problem is you need a job, you need income, you need all the things. But their problem emerged several months earlier when they realized that they're never going to keep up with their workload, or they realized that, oh my gosh, so and so's retiring and we're going to hire, going to do a little promotions, but we're going to have a gap. We have a open job. That's a bad thing. Or the economy's going in a new direction, or new technology is available. Whatever, some problem occurred to them months before they ever talked to you, and you're part of this. And so, what I was advising people to do, and what I find myself doing, is talking to them less about what I do, but more about, tell me about their context. What is it you're trying to do? What is it? What are you trying to accomplish? And of course, we all do this, right? We do a little research on it. But beyond knowing sort of like, okay, this company is in the medical device field, and this company, and having a base level knowledge in the interview, it's like, what are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish? How's your team going? Will it, if let's say you bring in a new technology, do you anticipate that that new technology might shake things up in your company culture? Right? It's like, try to understand the context, try to understand really the problem that emerged a couple of months ago, and explore with them whether or not I am a good solution to that problem. And it's the feeling of it when it feels like it's going well. One thing that really tells you it's going well is that they relax. They start to, they can focus on their problem, not defend themselves against you and maybe your and my ability to, or urgency to like throw one exciting fact at them after another, but rather you're their partner in sorting out if this is this a good conversation to have. And sometimes, every now and then, you get to be the one to say, you know what, I don't think I'm your guy. I don't think I've got the technologies that you need, or in my case, technology. I don't think. I'll tell you a little bit more about this a little bit later, I'm sure. I had another job. I had another company approach me recently, and another startup. While I've got my current job, they approached me and said, "Hey, we'd love to have you back because another position's opened up." I ended up saying no because they're too hectic. Because as a startup, they
Mhm.
are in the dynamic, fast moving, work late hours kind of thing. And I said, and they paid a lot more than my current job. And I thought about it, and I said, no, no, thanks. I'm not going to be your guy. Everything about it sounds really amazing. That kind of pace won't work for me today. Not as a 35-year-old. Yeah. But anyway, the thing is, that was me addressing what they needed because I was not what they needed. And anyway, that's what the thing is in the conversation with them, is to have less focus on how amazing I am, and like, who are you? What's your company trying to accomplish? What does success mean to you? One great question was, and I think I shared this in that post, is, suppose you gave me this job. Suppose we all decide that I'm perfect for this job, and I come to work for you, and 6 months later, we're all delighted. Everyone thinks Tom was the right guy. This turned out great. He was the best person to hire. What happened? How do we know? Like, what changed? What got improved? What fits? And it's a neat question because it gets them to two things. One, it does get them to picture me in the job, which is always, kind of cool. But the other thing is, they hear that I want to know what it feels like when this works for them. I want to know what it feels like to work at that company for them. Anyway, that has turned out to be it was a popular post on LinkedIn. I mean, not hundreds of thousands of shares, but it was a pleasant kind of burst.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, like you said, that really had an impact on you.
Oh, yeah, it had, and it actually affected how I did my interviews after then. After then, I just saw interviews as like an interaction, right? You have a problem and I have the solution to your problem. So let's chat about it. So once I saw it in that light, interviews became easier for me. Like
Sure.
interviews become easier. So thanks for sharing that. So I thought you have lots of insight to share with us. You're just getting started, right? So yeah, so let's go with when you were job searching. Yeah, are there any insights you would like to share, or you already shared one on the interviewing? Yeah, so
Mhm.
maybe if you have like insights to share with other job seekers that can help them like progress in their job search?
Yeah. I'll tell you what I've learned. I don't know that I'd call them insights. I mean, you're very generous saying that. And I'll tell you how the first thing that jumps to mind is how I just managed to keep going for 6 months. And a lot of people have heard this, I suppose, is job hunting is its own job. You've got put in your 40 hours a week of working to get another job. And I can't, not really. I can't do that nonstop. And so I didn't. I kind of followed my own, I don't know, my body's wisdom or my just into, it's like, no, I'm going to take a walk. It's 2 in the afternoon. It's a lovely spring day. I'm going to just go for a walk for an hour and just do that. So there's that modulation of how much effort you can really, really put into it. So if there's any insight there, just trust yourself and forgive yourself if you can't keep it up. And don't let yourself slip. If you're down to like, one application a week, I got to bring it up a bit, but it was good to release myself from the expectation that I had to just do this like a machine. One thing. Another thing I know that we talked about, and I guess comes back, is I don't know if there's any insight here so much as just an awareness of how weird it is, which is the AI side of job hunting. And I use some AI tools to help me to format my resume. I made custom resumes for just about every application. Well, there's another thing, I suppose. I made custom applications for every single job, fine tuning which bullets would be in each and reframing or rephrasing things. A lot of it in pursuit of the approval of some AI system out there, right? So if a particular project that I did mainly from a technological point of view, like, I list that the bullets are all technology things that happened at that job. But this job's got, the application is for more of a salesy thing. So I'd go back and I'd rephrase a couple of things to just emphasize the salesy side of whatever the task was. You can always choose your phrasing and without lying, without making things up. You can always, and I was doing that. And it was, somewhere along the line, I had to acknowledge this isn't helping me. It may help others, but at the end, it was like, given how much effort I was putting into that, I was not getting more than my share of interviews. It really wasn't. So I then evolved to the next step, which is I laid out. In fact, I still got it posted on my wall over here, though I don't need it. I went through all of the, at this point, like 50 or 60 unique resumes and collapsed them down to about 7. One's for an architect, for a senior architect, for a developer, for a senior developer, for a consultant, for a solutions architect. And I just like kind of collapsed down into just those. And that was easier to just send out those and not to suffer over the details each and every time. So I kind of went that whole thing of like, I've got one resume that does everything, to I've got an infinite number of resumes that handle everything, to I've got about 7 or 8 that are good enough, and we'll proceed from there. So that was, and then you and I were talking about the kind of AI hiring wars going on, where we're using AI to get the perfect words into the resume so that the hiring company's AI sees those perfect words or whatever other characteristics and raises you up based on whatever magical algorithm they have. And then our AI tools start to address their rules. And so we end up in like this kind of, you end up in this thing where it's like the machines are talking to the machines, right? My machine generated resume is going into their machine driven resume evaluation system. And between those two AIs, over here is me and over there is the hirer. And it's really us who want to talk. We don't want the machines doing it all. And I don't have a solution for that. That just seems to be the moment we're in right now, which is what helped in the end for me, I suppose, of having a personal friend tell his, the hiring manager, you should talk to Tom. As far as I know, all our communication was human to human, and that made a difference. So if there's any insight there, is do what you can to talk human to human, to have a conversation even before the resume gets shared.
Yeah.
And that's very broad and non-specific. So I hope that's
so talking on your current job and the introduction you got, there is no way you would have gotten that introduction if you were not first good at what you do, and also if you don't already have a good impression with your friend, right? So I want you to talk a bit about that to job seekers and how relationship and being good at your job and maybe personal branding if it's any way helps, right? How it all comes into play in today's job market.
Unless you're thinking of something particular that was very clever that I said the last time we talked, I don't know that I've got any insights into personal brand. In fact, in some ways, I was cautious to. So, what's my personal brand? First of all, I have no idea. But what I do on the side, and this happened a lot when I was job hunting. Okay, so I set my LinkedIn profile to be, I am searching for a job. Right, you put on that green flag, and almost immediately, all the scammers of the universe jump out to say, "Hey, we've got this fake job for you." Hey, I really want to tell my boss about your resume. Can you give us your WhatsApp number or your phone number so we can get off of LinkedIn before the admin shut down this spam account? All right. And what I did as a hobby, and I've been doing this for years, and I did it more so, was started to play with the scammers and create these ridiculous dialogues where I just got weirder and weirder, seeing how far I could go to make them get them confused, right? Is this serious? Is this guy, and it's humorous for me. It made me laugh, made my friends laugh. But I didn't know if I wanted that to be the first thing anybody saw when they looked me up in LinkedIn, right? So I actually put out my most popular post on LinkedIn was one where I was essentially as a screenshot of me tormenting a scammer. And it was funny. I try not to be sarcastic or snotty, or anything. I just try to be weird until they lose track of what the heck's going on. And it was like 40,000 impressions or something. It was the best thing ever. And then a friend of mine said, LinkedIn is kind of like your online resume. It's not really your playground. You probably shouldn't do it. And I thought, you know what, you're right. And I took it down. So I had a little bit of a thing of trying to make sure my public presence as a worker with my profile and my background, whatever talents I have, was kind of isolated from what I do for fun. There's a little bit of keeping some professional distance. And I always wondered, if I stopped keeping that professional distance, might that help? Because I might come across as like who I am, like my impulse towards making people laugh, or my ability maybe to make people laugh might have made me more interesting to some hires. I just don't know. And that's the thing about with a lot of this is you can think of a million little experiments you can run, but in the end, you're only running one experiment, right? I could only either show this silly side of me, or I could not show this silly side of it, but I couldn't then figure out which is the best. And that's scary. That's so there's that fear of, am I doing this right? And I don't have a solution to that. I think I did with my first job hunt, where it just took 6 or 7 weeks. Hey, I know how to do this. I've done the experiment, and the experiment works. I know how to do this now. 4 months later, I had no idea how to make it work. And so it's hard, and that's bearing up under that question of, is it me that I'm not getting a job? Is it my lack of talent? Honestly, is it my age? I mean, I'm 61, right? So I'm in technology, which is generally a young person's field. Is it that? Should I ignore that? Should I address that? Should I, share the silly posts I do about scammers? Should I hide that? And you don't really know. Or is it not me? I'm fine that the industry is nuts right now. Again, without going into politics, a lot of things happened between January and June that shook up American business, and therefore much, other countries' business. Is it that everyone's scared to hire, which is not, I can do whatever I want. No one's going to hire me because the world is scared to hire right now. Maybe that, and you just never know. And then always somebody, just gets a job, and you're like, right? Like somehow it's all one big equation, and their life is completely the same as yours, except they got a job and you didn't. It's like, you just don't know. You just have to kind of bear with it and keep being a way that feels good to you. Like you're not selling yourself as something
So
you're not.
how did you keep up? How did you keep up? Because you just shared when, those kind of down times. How do you keep up with those kind of times when you have to think, is it my age? Could it be this? Could it be that? How did you keep up during your job search journey?
A couple of basic things I did, and this is very broad. I did try to reach out to people that I had worked with, and I tried to reach out to people that I worked with that I really enjoy, that I would count as friends or almost friends, decent, good, smart people that I had worked with a long time ago, and I would just say hi. I would just reconnect. And it always feels a little artificial when they know you're looking for a job and suddenly your name pops up.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to feel so stupid, and that's going to feel so transparent. But at the same time, there's a part of me, and maybe part of you, that's like, but I really did like them and it would be nice to talk to them. So why should
Yeah.
I not do that? And generally, I found that they kind of remembered that friendship like you do. And they're like, oh, Tom, how are you? Yeah, no, things. Yeah, see, you're looking for a job, but how's your wife? How's your kids? And it generally became the conversation I kind of wanted, which is the warmth and the reminder. Because those people in your past who you've worked with where it went well and you respected each other and you succeeded together, they, for me, were like, it's almost like, what's the right way to put this? They reminded me of how I can be at a workplace. I can be somebody who is admired and somebody who is respected and somebody whose opinion is good and useful. And so that was, I'd get that. And it wasn't that they were saying those words, but more like we'd be reminiscing about some project that was really, really tough. And, we succeeded or we didn't succeed, but we remember the challenge of it. And just together remembering the challenge of it just kind of re-anchors you and like, no, I'm good. I'm good at what I do. I'm
Yeah.
worth, and that helped a lot. Same thing with just talking with, keeping in touch with old friends, even if it's not at all related to work. Just connect with good people. Just connect with good people and be social and talk. So those things definitely shored me up. Some days I would come down to my little basement office here to continue the job hunt, and my heart would just get heavy, and I'm like, I think I'm going to take the day off. You know, I think I'm going to go for a bike ride. I think I'm going to, I don't know, go upstairs and read. But sometimes you just had to grant that it was more than you could do today, and
Yeah.
you just let it be.
Yeah, true. So, can you share the mistakes you made in your job search?
Based on the job search, just remember it's a good question, and I know I made some, but in like especially that 6 months of hunting, there was so little feedback. It's almost hard to know which ones were the mistakes, right? Like
Exactly.
like if I got to the first interview, then the second, then the third, then I did something really dumb and the job went away. It'd be pretty clear. But a lot
Yeah.
of what I saw was that I'd either get the first interview and then nothing, or I wouldn't even get the first interview. That
Yeah.
happened. That was most of what happened.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would get all the way up. Everything would be great. There's the company that just called me back recently, interviewed with them originally in March, talked my way all the way up to like the senior vice president or whatever. And it was great all the way. And then 2 weeks later, I got an automated email saying, hey, we've decided to move on. And I,
Ah.
and I was like, what happened? There's no way to diagnose what did I do wrong. And when I talked to them, when they call back, just to close off that thought, when they call back, um, I said, hey, you guys, I mean, it was lovely that they're reaching out to me. So I felt I had a little bit, and I already had my job. I had the new job. So I had a little bit of distance between, I could take a chance. And I took the chance of saying, what happened back then? You guys went all the way up to the senior vice president. And then you guys just said, bleh. And it turned out that they were having a lot of turmoil in their sales department. They had like brought in a senior vice president, then he did something wacky and they fired him and they brought in another one and something weird happened there and nothing to do with me. So it's not like I didn't make mistakes. To back to your original question,
Yeah.
I'm going to make plenty of mistakes. I don't. Nothing much jumps out because of the lack of data. So much. You just interview and you get nothing, and it's like, how do I course correct? What was something wrong in my resume? Well, okay. So one does jump out. A lot of, and this may be a technology industry thing, but there's a lot of emphasis now in interviews on behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when you had a really difficult coworker and you managed to negotiate the thing. Tell me about a time when a project was really going off the rails and you had to communicate to the customer what went wrong when it was your company's mistake. And there's a whole process for how to answer. Like you describe the situation. It's a STAR method. Is like
Yeah.
ARI. Describe the situation. Tell about the task needed. What was your actions and what were the results? Right. And you're supposed to like do all of that in about 90 seconds or 2 minutes. I talk too much. You're going to have a lot of fun in the editing room with this, scraping away all the other stuff and finding what the hell it is I'm trying to say. So that's one where I know that I lean into some hopeful sense of being an engaging person rather than being a concise person. So I think that probably cost me some things sometimes. The other bigger thing, and maybe this is a whole other discussion that we should get into too, is that, and I mentioned how back a year and a half ago, I had my crash. I ended up in the hospital for a couple of days because of the stress around this particular job, this particular project, and ultimately about me as a person. Quick couple of details without telling that whole blah, blah. story. My two family members had died in the past 6 months. This April was when I ended up going to the hospital. In April, that it was Friday, and the next day I was in the middle of this horrible project that was falling behind, and everything was like just gloom and doom, and it was terrifying, and my boss was upset, and the cousin who had passed away about 3 months earlier, the memorial was happening that Saturday. So here it is Friday. The next day I had to get in the car, drive 5 hours to the event, and people were flying in from all over the country, and we're all going to celebrate my cousin's life and her, what she meant to us and so forth. And I was so panicked about this job that I was focused almost entirely on how can I have this funeral event interfere with my job as little as possible, right? I was behind on deliverables. I was all the rest is like, okay, so it's Friday. How long can I work before driving up so I get there at midnight, and then the next morning will be the event, and I'll get out as quick as I can. I'll be gone like maybe 2 in the afternoon. I can get back here and at least spend all of Sunday working on the project again. And with that, I essentially, there's more details, but I ended up in the hospital because I was caught between those two things. I broke down sobbing in this rental car before leaving home, before driving to Massachusetts. And I broke down. It's like I'm trying to have my family, trying to minimize how much my real life is interfering with my job. Right? How do I preserve my job and this ongoing stress in the face of the fact that somebody I care about deeply is dead? And I just realized how reversed I had my brain and how wrong, how I had let the wrong things become the important things, or the degree to which I'd let them become the important things. You need a job, and you can't just like, bug out on your job to go play with your kid park every day, but I was way off balance. And that's ultimately what this past year has been about. So back to your question of like mistakes made, one thing I really worked hard on, my wife has been wonderful about this. She's been my partner and my co-conspirator and sometimes my saboteur, I think in a good way, of when I'm looking at jobs that I could interview for, am I doing this because I want a job that sounds really sexy? Or am I doing this because this job is a job worth doing and that I can do well? So I was putting a fair amount of time into jobs like at Amazon, where they pay a tremendous amount of money. The same title as another company, but you might get 150,000 more a year. And that, for a lot of that, I kept applying to Amazon. And it's like, eventually it's like, I'm doing it not because I think that's going to be a good place to work. I had lots of evidence, lots of stories about it's not a good place to work. Not just the warehouses, but in software, that it's a brutal place, apparently. But I wanted the badge, yeah, prestige and the ego and so that was a big mistake. Was like, and that may not be a common one among your listeners, but for me, it's been very much a year and a half now of peeling apart. Why am I working? What am I serving by working? Am I trying to impress my friends? Am I trying to impress my bosses, or am I trying to impress myself? Or am I just trying to like make sure I've got money coming in, doing something that's not noxious, not awful, not like, I don't know. It wouldn't be a fit. It's I don't want to work someplace bad, but I'm working now at a place that makes auto parts, or actually more distributes, and it's more on the sales, the supply chain management side of it. Perfectly innocuous. Is it morally good? No, but it's not morally bad. It's just a thing that needs to happen. We need cars, we need parts. Great. But I get to work with good people, and I get to work with smart people and kind people. Uh, and it's not as much money as the other guys when they came back to ask me again. But it was really hard. Like, I did the first sort of initial interview with that first guy, and I said, "What happened?" And he told me about the sales VPs and so forth. But then it was like a couple of weeks of, should I try? Should I try for this new position? It pays a lot more, but it's at a startup, and it's risky, and it's crazy, and it's high pressure, and it's all these things. And wouldn't it be cool if I was able to be the guy? And my wife and some of my friends really, really, really helped me to say, stop, you're good where you are. More money is nice, but not if it's going to feed that ego, and not if it's going to tip me back towards, I am a good person if my boss likes me. I'm a good person if I make this much money. I'm a success if this external thing tells me I am. So that was a big mistake for a lot of the jobs I was hunting for, was linking it to my ego and my notion of myself and this narrative I have about myself, when my narrative ought to be about my wife and my family and my kids, and doing a podcast of my own, or playing around with more scammers, or whatever gives me makes me more me, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing those. What did you wish all job seekers knew? Yeah, you shared about priorities, not making not just about the badge or the prestige that comes with, getting working with Google and all the big techs. What do you wish all job seekers knew? Like what worked for you? Yeah, that you would
Mm.
like to share with job seekers.
Well, one thing that does help, I think helped me, was doing what I can to help other people get jobs. I suppose the post in LinkedIn that kind of connected you and I was an element of that, right? I mean, it was a broadcast to everybody. It wasn't to
Yeah,
specific.
yeah,
But there was a couple of groups of people that I connected up with who were also job seeking, where we kind of leaned in and supported each other and cheered each other on. Hey, Lydia got an interview. Awesome, good. Let us know how that goes. Or Carol's got she's up for the second round of interviews, or she got a job offer. Fantastic. So having a little personal community of people who are also in it is where you can just cheer each other on. It helps you to get the focus off yourself. It also reminds you
yeah,
you're not alone, because this is
yeah,
lonely. Being the one that does not have a job can feel really, really lonely, and so that it makes it less lonely. It normalizes. It's like, it's okay. This is a place people end up. It's okay. Just carry on. But don't sap yourself of energy by also criticizing yourself for being the one without a job. This It's gotten easier for me. As a consultant, there were times when there were no customers. And I think I'd been through 4 or 5 different layoffs, where a whole chunk of the company was shut down. And the most recent one was a year ago, when it was 4 people who went down to 3. So technically my department was eliminated. It was just me, but I don't even count that. I'm thinking of bigger companies, and somewhere along the line, it's like, it sucks, but this happens. You know, you can't treat it like it's angry at you, or like it's a judgment of you. Keep trying to get better, judge yourself in a fair way, and try to make yourself stronger and a better candidate. That's totally appropriate. But just take off your back the burden of, I'm a bad person, or I'm a failure person, or I'm less of a person without a job. You're still you. You're still you. People like you. People dig you. People enjoy that you exist. People have loved working with you. One thing that was really helpful for me is, and there's probably a lot of things like this, but for me, it was Reddit. Reddit has a subgroup called, oh, I should have the name of this. I'll make sure you get the name so you can include it in the notes for the episode. But it's like job hunting hacks, or it's not quite that, but something along those lines. A lot of it is people expressing their sorrow that they haven't found a job yet. A lot of people who are really hating that they don't have a job yet and working hard. I tried not to read those, or I just sample a few, because you can really lose a lot of your own energy and your own enthusiasm, your own confidence, if you dwell on those. But that was about 2/3 of it. The other third were people saying, I tried this and it really worked for me, or I heard this and I'm giving this a try. So the advice would be, spot clever ideas and try something new, just a little bit. Maybe, reformatting a resume is a simple thing, but maybe coming at your resume from a totally different angle, or um, a different way of like in the LinkedIn post, a different way of conducting yourself in an interview, a question to start with. When they say, so, you have any questions for me? Well, now you and I, Victoria, you and I know that, well, yeah, we've got a whole bunch of questions to ask, but they're not ways to force me into the story. It's about finding out about them. That's an experiment to try. That helps a lot, is to see what other people are doing, because it keeps you fresh and it keeps it a little bit more like an adventure,
yeah,
hopefully, than just
yeah.
a crisis you're trying to solve.
Wow, thanks so much. Those are lots of insights. You said you don't have insights. You're just putting it out there. Like, wow.
You're reminding me of whatever the heck it was I said back the last time. So
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. So now let's talk about recruiters, hiring managers, hiring teams. While you were job searching, what is that one thing that you wish they knew, right? That would make the lives of job seekers way, way much easier than it is right now.
yeah, what I look back on in those 6 months was, Well, just the same sort of thing. Just try new things. Gravitate towards the people who are, of course, the people who succeed in their job hunt disappear from the voices that we are listening to, right? Because they're the ones who are now not talking about trying to hit a job. They've got a job. They vanish.
Yeah.
But talk to the people who are bringing enthusiasm to it. Listen to them too, or read about them on LinkedIn. Read about them in Reddit. In my case, a dozen other places. I suppose every now and then, and this is kind of my I like humor. Every now and then I just like fire off a resume for a job I'm wildly unqualified for, like, senior vice president of international sales or something like that. It's like, sure. I don't know if that helped. It made it more, it kept my spirits up. A lot of this maybe comes back to that, which is just like your own stamina management with this, because it can be a lot of effort for very little feedback, and you've got to keep going. Um,
Yeah.
and so eat well, sleep well, all the obvious stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's tiring, and it's frightening,
It is. It is actually. It is very frightening.
You have to decide, like, which bill can I kind of not get to right now? Which one can I circle back? We went through that like everybody, I suppose, does, and it's frightening, and it is lonely. So manage your stamina, treat yourself well. Don't expect that you can do 8 hours a day of job hunting every day, all the time. That's too much to expect.
Yeah. So imagine you were a hiring manager or a recruiter, right? Or a
Hmm.
hiring team. What would you like to change about the current job market? Or what would you like to add to it to make it much better for job seekers?
Yeah. Current job market, I would try to increase, well, as a broad cultural thing, right? Not as a single hiring manager, but I would love anything that gets more human to human contact. And the thing is, you can't automate human to human contact, right?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of the AI and before AI too, a lot of machinery is in this industry. It's almost a
Yeah.
shame that this is an industry, the job hunting industry. Really, how did we make it in? It's like we've got all of this stuff between us, and that's a shame. I don't know how to solve that, but I'd love that. I'd love that anything that lets, especially if it's anything that lets them speak and discover each other in a context bigger than this job. I have exactly this job to fill, and we're gonna like have every bit of our conversations just about versus, hi, who are you? Tell me what you like. It's like, and you know, I've had very great interviews where we both agreed I wasn't the right person, or I was eager, but they said, no, we're going to go with the other person. And I made sure to kind of signal back, that's cool. You got to pick the right person. And I dig you. I like you as a company. Keep me in mind because I've enjoyed this process, you know, and so anyway, I'm wandering off of your question. If I was a hiring manager, I guess I just try to do the things I just said. Like, um, it worked for me that I had a friend who brought me in and got me extra attention. I would certainly do something similar.
Let's talk about the IT industry. Um, there are software developers listening to the episode. So what would you say are the most skills like in demand in the IT industry?
Well, it'd be the industry is so huge that any answer you give will kind of show how provincial you are and how small of an area you know about the industry. I mean, but one broad answer is getting to know what AI is and what it can do is great. Now, if you want, there's lots of places in that spectrum. Like if you want to develop and like open up new vistas in AI, like do more of the core AI LLM technology and so forth. That's one thing. And I don't have a whole lot of advice about this. Awful lot going on in that space, with Chat GPT and everybody else. But that's one thing. The next thing would be like smart ways of incorporating AI into, an existing process. So for instance, at our company, it's about the management and distribution of car parts across a gigantic space of car parts manufacturers and salespeople and sales organizations. Is there a place for AI in that? And being the one who has got enough acuity of what AI is good at, what it's not good at, what it's getting better at, to be able to say, yes, we can use AI. This particular version of it right here in this process would really give us some good thing. That's a good thing to know. So AI, of course, you can't answer a question like that without mentioning that. there's lots of IT jobs that are not that. They're not cutting edge. They're not leading the industries. There's work to be done. So if you're in IT, come do that. I also know, and this goes back to AI a little bit, and I was enjoying this myself while I was hunting for a job and trying to learn new skills, is there's a whole thing called vibe coding right now, like to be in the vibe of developing. Vibe coding is, instead of using, like, I'm going to write my code and I'm going to use AI to advise me as I write my code. Like, I wanted to have a routine that's going to do blah, 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 blah. And then the AI leans in and says, hey, by the way, you might want to do it this way. Here's a faster way, blah, blah, blah. Vibe coding is where you take your hands off the keyboard. You can literally just, like, use your microphone and talk to the AI software and say, build me a tool that's going to do this. It's going to use this kind of database. It's going to accomplish this. Here's the users. Here's the admin user. Here's the average user. Here's what they should each do. Describe, describe, describe. And it writes the software entirely. And that's neat. I made some fun tools. Even at my new job, I made a very useful tool that I keep going back to. That's very bare bones. It's nothing the outside world will ever see. But that is going to keep getting better, I think. And that's an interesting space. I'd keep my eyes on that. Is you shifting from being a technology developer to being a product manager for a robot, and the AI, creates the thing. And there's lots of ways to do that are, kind of where it's good, well-written code, where it's highly secure. You can do, and all of those things are going to get better and better. So, but anyway, that's a novel thing. I don't think we could ever do that before, is to be able to just, with a microphone, tell the machine to build me a new machine. And it does, and it works, and it does things beyond what I could do as a coder. Or I could do as a coder, but it would take me 2 weeks, and I got it done in an afternoon. So that's exciting. And that will, right now, today, I would only build trivial tools, little things that help me in my job, but nobody else is going to see. But 5 years from now, we'll probably be building fairly remarkable, sales worthy systems through that, which go back to your original question, like what would you say to somebody in IT? That kind of blurs the boundary of who gets to make software. Right now, you need a developer to make software. In the future, you might just be somebody who's really good at prompting AI, and they may not know the slightest thing about how to write software, but they're both creating software.
Yeah.
So it's gonna blur a boundary there.
Yeah. So now, let's say you're talking to, let's say, upcoming career professionals that are listening to this call right now, or maybe they have their entry level, or they have few experience, let me say 3 years of experience. Now with this AI coming in, what would be your advice, or what would you say to them about how they can build a successful IT career while in this AI era?
Yeah, I suppose if you've got an opportunity it's really a hard question because I can picture so many different scenarios. But I'll just go with the first answer that comes to me, is if you've got an opportunity to pursue something that's going to teach you about AI in any flavor, like any place on that scale, like writing the original baseline AI code or using AI code cleverly, putting it to good use somewhere, opt towards doing that versus not doing it. There's lots of jobs that are not trying to lean into AI.
Yeah.
If you find yourself with 2 job offers and one of them, they're otherwise equivalent, but one's got the advantage that you'll be getting experience in the AI space, then I would probably lean towards that. It feels like it's still finding its place. AI is still finding its place in our lives and in software development and in a lot of things. There's a lot of hype about what it can do, and everybody suddenly slaps an AI feature onto their thing and claims, hey, we leverage AI. You print the label prettier, you haven't changed the world. But getting in there and even just improving your own acuity of vision of what's nonsense and what's meaningful with the use of AI is great. You'll be ahead of a lot of the world just to start to see. We tried to use this flavor of AI for this particular purpose, and it generated this, which in the end was pointless. We got no advantage out of it. But if we had done this, we might have. Now you've got even just that small bit of acuity of vision that a lot of people don't have. So give yourself that opportunity.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. Are there any certifications or trainings that you would say, all right, this entry level professional, you can actually take this or something like that?
If you want to work at a company like Amazon, Microsoft, probably Google, I just haven't looked into it, but definitely Amazon, Microsoft. You want to work for one of the big companies, and there's lots more big companies, they'll have their own certifications, and it will count a lot if you do or don't have a certification. So I really, when I was in that hunt for an Amazon job, I had to notice, in fact, it's a little bit of like understanding myself. I had zero interest in getting a certification. I had lots of sort of like, it's logical and sensible that I should want to get a certification because that will help me get the job that I say I want. But I had zero enthusiasm to do it. So sometimes jumping back to an earlier question, sometimes that's one of the ways, a bit of advice is like, read yourself. If you are saying, I want this, but I have got no native basic enthusiasm to actually do it, maybe take it off the table, right? So in any case, but still, if for somebody who's motivated and they do feel that, then get the certifications that'll help you get up the interview chain because it does matter a lot. And the major thing is, I suppose, if you're really getting started, is nothing succeeds like success. And so I jumped into technology when it was kind of novel to do so. People generally would train to be software engineers and go, they want to do that. The internet was young. Everybody suddenly wanted to be in technology. I was part of that wave of people. And I just showed, that I could build a couple of good and useful things. And that was all the credibility I needed to get my first job, which was a very modest job. It wasn't, I didn't wasn't a grand breakthrough. But if you can get experience, work on nonprofit projects, work on shareware projects, develop a funny thing that just lights you up. Like some guys down in I think it was South Carolina or North Carolina, they, this going back 15 years, they made a mobile app just called Yo, Y-O. And all it was like, if you had the Yo app, Victoria, and I had the Yo app, I might just go, Victoria, Yo. And on your thing, it would just go, Tom says Yo. You're like, Yo, that's it. That was the entirety of the app. But whoever made that, I am sure, got several great jobs because it was funny and was not practical, but it succeeded. It became a very popular app for a short period of time. So do something, either make something nutty yourself or fun or useful yourself, lean into other projects. And I've definitely heard lots of people say, like, go to the meetups, go to the group community gatherings around whatever the technology is that you like. It's networking and it's interesting. And those are great things. You get to meet other people who are enthused about it and you start to harvest all of their ideas, all the different ways they succeeded in their careers, informs ways that you can approach it yourself. So those are a handful of things I could recommend.
Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing those. So let's talk about you and what you're doing on your podcast. You can talk to our listeners on your podcast and what you're working on.
The podcast. Yeah, it's I still feel so awkward saying that I'm doing a podcast. So when I had my meltdown year and a half ago, we ended up in the hospital. A family rallied around me. I didn't end up seeing my cousin's gathering. It was that weekend, and I was and everyone was lovely about that. But I in the months afterwards, I realized that I knew a number of people who had been through a similar thing, that had a moment in their career when they realized if they kept doing what they were doing in their career, they were going to demolish themselves because it was costing them. It was kind of like building them up on one side while eroding them at another part. And eventually the thing was going to collapse, or it did collapse. And I realized I knew a handful of people like that. So I called one of them up and said, I've just been through this experience myself and I'm pulling back and I'm trying to reassess, like, who am I with regard to being a working person and having a job and having a boss, and but also being a person who wants to be time with his family and get this whole balance. I said, what was it like for you? And because he had a full out, I'll say meltdown. I don't know if that's the word he would use, kind of imploded. From the outside, what I could see is that he kind of imploded. He was a very high ranking person at his company. And then one Monday he was gone. And then we didn't hear a whole lot from him. And he was a lovely guy. He still is. And in talking to him, I later, over the year or so after that, found out that he kind of had a crisis. And so then I had my crisis and I called him up and I said, tell me about your crisis. Tell me about what was in collision. What was, this part of your life and that part of your life. What was that? And he was amazing. He was generous and took his time, and he, let me ask 100 questions, and we talked for an hour and a half or something. And he just told it. And the details aren't important for you and me, but he had his moment. He had his, he could feel it coming on for this number of weeks or months. And then this happened, and then he kind of recovered, and then this happened, and then he kind of, and then had the, implosion, and then he was gone, and then he was left to sort out his life afterwards. Like, what does this mean? I'm suddenly no longer the CEO at this company. I'm suddenly, wow, so so I was asking, how did you bring yourself back together? How did you have disintegration and then you have reintegration? What was the reintegration? What did you learn? He was wonderful. I joked with him too. I said, this is the most presumptuous thing I could do is say, hey, got a minute? Tell me about the worst day of your life, because I'm curious, I couldn't even promise him anything. Like, I'm not going to say, I'm going to make you famous or I'm going to, help others. I just want to hear what it's like. And he was great. So that's what the podcast is about, is
Um,
they helped me so much in telling me their stories. Some of them were decades old, some of them were much more recent, but they helped me to see the ways that they were pushing too hard in some direction that didn't work for them anymore. That spiritually, mentally, emotionally just was the wrong thing to do with the wrong intensity. They had to adjust something, and they learned that through a crisis. And that's what it's about. I want for people to come away saying, I learned something about what that could be like. If I am about to go through that crisis myself, I'm listening to people who've already been there and found their way through it and found their way to the far side. But it's also, I want for people to come away saying, that's a good person. I'm so sorry they had to go through that. I'm so proud of them for having gone through it and to have reintegrated themselves on the far side of it. I want for them to stand out. But we'll see where this goes. It's an experiment, but it's also a way of, you know what it is? It's me putting my eggs in a basket. It's like all my eggs have been in the work basket, and that's what shows that I'm useful and meaningful and worthwhile and a good person. And this is a new basket, right? That has nothing to do with my job. It's it's a creative work. It's an adventure. It's a chance to be a complete moron and make all sorts of dumb mistakes. And has nothing to do with my work life, and that's unusual for me. I don't have a lot of hobbies. I don't, this is a new thing in a lot of ways.
wow. 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 So, dear listeners, if you if you encountered a career crisis in your life, so I'm going to drop a link to Tom's podcast in the description below, so you can reach out to him and also be a guest on this podcast. So Tom, thank you so much for taking out your time, taking out your weekend to come share insights, even if you won't, even if you don't agree with it, coming to share insights to job seekers. You were once a job seeker and now you have a job. So that means a lot to a lot of people. Where you are is where some people desire to be. So thank you for making our time to speak to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Dear listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, if you learned one or two things, I'm going to link Tom's LinkedIn profile. He's very active on LinkedIn. He's always posting, always commenting, always there. So you can always reach out to him if you have questions and if you also want to be a guest on his podcast. And also, if you are a job seeker and you have a story to tell, and you have insights that have worked for you, you have strategies that has worked for you, you can also be a guest in this podcast. So I'm going to also link lots of links in description. But yeah, you can also be a guest and you can fill the form and also be part of this. So thank you so much for listening so far and do have a great day. Thank you. Bye.